Sorry I popped in so late there. I had stuff to get done, and like I said, I'm a teacher. They pay us for 8 hours, but we're basically on call like all day, all night. And I've been sick for a week. You might even hear a little bit in my voice. And been sleeping 14 hours a day, which haven't been getting much done.
Yeah, I'm getting over that same thing happening.
I don't know if it was COVID or not. I didn't even bother taking the test this time.
I'm not taking a freaking test. I lost my smell and my taste. I was like, oh yeah, yep. It's the weirdest thing though. I've never had such a linear cold or whatever it is where, Skyla caught it first and she starts having these symptoms and then I start developing, and it's like it's all in order. It's the weirdest. I've never had a cold like that. It's like I knew what symptom was coming next because Skyla had it and then it would go away, and that it's so weird.
Same thing happened here. But
did I hear you say that you're a teacher, Snorky?
Yeah, I teach.
What subjects?
Engineering and automation.
Snork is a freaking smart ass dude. Like,
wow.
At a small college.
My parents, when they founded the family business Anselm Associates Incorporated, because my dad had worked as a consulting engineer for Arthur Young after he got his master's in electrical engineering from Stanford in 1967 there from Palo Alto. And he specialized in automation. And probably the two biggest projects I can remember Mom and Dad working on was when we lived in Grosse Pointe Park, Michigan, which is the nice suburb of Detroit, Michigan. And Dad was doing a project for Mr. I got to think of the guy's name. It was Lee Iacocca, I think it was Lee Iacocca. It was the Chrysler plant. And he designed a high pressure water system that was automated with the line to cut the metal quarter panel pieces out and to cut out the steel using high pressure water jet instead of, because prior to that time they were cutting with welding torches and had to be sand. And so by cutting with the water, and it was an automated process, and it could cut with 3 different jets at the same time, so it was a beveled edge, and then they didn't have to go back, and it didn't have to be reworked, and so it was faster. And then the other thing was, I remember my mom flying back and forth to a place, I think it was Fond du Lac in Wisconsin, with the Fisher Bacon Company, and they also worked in Louisville at the Bluegrass Industrial Park, and that was the automation program when it was in 1985, because I mean we had the Osborne 1, we had the Commodore 64, we had the Apple IIe. I mean, growing up, we had every single first iteration of these computers. And like for those that don't know, the Osborne 1, I'm pretty sure is the first. Well, it was considered a portable computer, but I mean it was like a little 3-inch green screen and big yellow case, and thing weighed like, it's like carrying around an ammo box or something, and they designed this bacon slicer with the sensor on it, and it was able to slice a pound per second, and so it could go through an entire side of bacon, which comes off the hook and goes on the conveyor, and getting it all to line up. And my dad was working on the mechanics of the conveyors and everything, and then my mom's sitting there writing the code and everything. And so when I went to college for the first time between 6th and 7th grade at Bowling Green, Kentucky, Western Kentucky University, I actually got to, that's really the only time in my life I ever was kind of on a track to learn code, because I was learning Pascal and Fortran and writing stuff in BASIC. And I mean, that's like almost 30 years ago, I guess. Well, no, longer than that, 35 years ago, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But, as a land surveyor and a draftsman and a cartographer, I've gone from manual drafting to, CAD drafting and stuff like that. But I never really did any automation and stuff like that. It just shocks me with all the young kids I work with now. And I just to torment them, I keep writing everything in cursive because none of them can read cursive. It just, oh
Snork,
dear.
you have to tell your pencil story.
Yeah,
I love that story.
Oh dear. Every year they're dumber, Snork. Every year they're dumber. But what am I telling you that you don't see?
I ask a few questions every year to see what's shifting. And this year I had people, or a few students, not know what a pencil was. And the ones that knew, many of them called them boomer sticks because they were something they'd find in their grandparents' drawers.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God.
I've shared that before. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. And didn't you have to go sharpen? Like, you had to go find a sharpener, right?
Yes. The department secretary gave us a sharpener on the wall. And because I was joking about putting on the test, how do you make it work?
The funniest thing,
like, I have so many pencils in my house, like being an artist, I have a million pencils and all the stuff. Yeah.
But the one that surprised me most was somebody that didn't know how to open a door. Must have spent their entire life where the doors opened for them.
Wow.
Like automatic doors. And I was going to the cafeteria and a student stopped and I saw the confused look. What do I do? What do I do? And I reached over and pulled open the door and the student was just like, I'm like, who hasn't opened a door?
Oh my God. So my nephew comes over, before we moved in here. So it was about 8 months ago at the old place. And I had a landline phone with a cord, and nephew comes over and the phone rings and he answers the phone, but he's sitting there fiddling around and he just goes to walk off with the phone. And of course what happens after he gets about 10 feet and he runs out of cord, right, Snork? All of a sudden the phone just snatches right out of his hand and goes to the floor and he's looking around. He's like, what the hell happened to the phone? I was like, the phone's on a cord. It's attached. Oh, wow. And so he just unplugs and I'm like, no, it won't work now. That's not a recharger cord, but.
Oh my God, he thought it was a chargeable plug for the freaking phone.
If you've never, ever used a landline phone in your entire life, I guess, just things I take for granted. But I was born when Richard Nixon was president. So, God, I'm getting old.
I was born when Eisenhower was president.
All right. You got me beat.
But I had, this is probably over 20 years ago, our dial tone wasn't present. And I called the phone company for help. And before touch tone, there was another system where we dialed by, and then there'd be click, 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 click.
Right.
And if you duplicated those clicks by hitting the switch hook, you could dial your phone. So I dialed 0, which is 10 clicks. And they were like, how did you call us? Their people had forgotten. And so I encounter a lot. So I don't take anything for granted anymore. I start with basics and work up.
What school do you teach at?
Oh, I wouldn't want to name it on here.
Oh, okay.
No, he's back.
But it's in the United States.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
So, but like a full blown university, not like a.
No, I'm teaching at a small community college.
Oh, cool. Well, that's enough. I'm not trying to pry because see, my degree is to be a teacher, and I actually got to teach for 2 years down in Ecuador recently, in 2017 and 2018. It was an absolute thrill getting to teach English down there, and you know, where I really got to have fun with it, particularly was there was always like a recreational module. And, I would ask for feedback, is there, you guys want to do a board game or this or that? And they always wanted to learn either cuss words in English, or they wanted to hear my hillbilly accent, and they wanted to learn hillbilly English. And I was always hesitant to teach them hillbilly English. I was like, listen, I mean, you guys have this huge Ecuadorian community in Corona and Queens. Like there's Ecuadorians all over New York City, tri-state area. And I'm like, I can't send any of you guys up there, I don't know what would happen, if you get off the MTA, like on 6th Avenue or something in Broadway, and you're like, howdy. That's really going to throw people off.
I had to teach a little bit when I was in Chicago. To get your grad degree, you have got to do some teaching. So, you're not the main teacher. You're just basically the grad assistant. And I had to teach. And one of the problems I have is I'm from the town where they used to send, right now I have a cold, but I'm from the town where they used to send people to learn how to speak like a weatherman.
Yeah. Midwestern accent.
The exact place where, like, there was a school that actually taught people how to speak like us. And they were weathermen.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's what I aspire to use normally in everyday conversation. What I call my radio voice, radio English.
But I had to teach in the urban Chicago students.
Yeah.
And they're still college students, but they came to our college. And when I started talking about stuff, they hit the floor laughing. I got, that man talks like a weatherman. and then once she said that, the rest of the class just kept dying when I'd talk. And then it's just common that people ask if I'm a weatherman or a teacher. And I really haven't been teaching very long. My father was ill. I moved out to Iowa. I didn't want to take a job with a company that was going to be shut down and move to some other country in a few years. And I thought, well, I'm teaching and stay local, and I will take a job as a teacher. And but my kids, when they were younger, I designed some computer factories, and I would get invited to, like, if a new board was released or something, go to the opening, and I would usually get one for either free or like a very small cost. So it was constantly building new computers with the new technology. When I build the new computers, the rest of the family would all trade down one on my computers. We had so many in the house that my kids would have LAN games with their friends before really internet was popular. We had a gigabit internet in the house, and we were able to have high-speed games. So we basically have computers in about every room of the house, all the outlets full, and the kids playing games with each other.
Skyla's building one right now. I should have her talk to you, Snork, about what she's got, because you know that I am not. I am technology challenged. We've had many conversations. I'm like, what?
You'll be happy to know, Snork, that I finally upgraded this compact Presario from pre-HP merger. So it's 2000 or 2001 compact Presario, and I finally put Windows 7 on it a few years ago because it It was on XP.
Did you say it was smoking?
No,
Oh.
it was on Windows XP when I bought it, and I moved it up to Windows 7, which is still like, when did Windows 7 come out? I don't know, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
More than 5 years ago.
I mean, my computer's like 20 years old. Because something goes wrong in it, and I just fix it, you know? Why get a brand new desktop? If the fan goes out, fix the fan. If I need a new board, I'll put a new board in it. There you go.
Oh, Nicole, I'm sorry it didn't work.
I believe in right to repair, Snork.
Kate says she's still using DOS.
Ah, MS-DOS. Oh, no.
Is that too bright?
Yeah.
Oh,
What?
No. Touch my fingers. And cut off. My computer, I guess it's too much light up there.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to share anything on here. Oh, there we go.
I've seen some of Snork's art. It's freaking crazy. It's really cool. Because it's not like what you would think, for art.
Not really art.
Oh, no, it is. It is so cool.
It's a more of a drawing.
Oh, it's definitely art. I can already tell it's art. I used to say that my maps are just maps, but I go back and look at the different plat maps and property maps and, architectural plans, or I guess some people would call them blueprints. A lot of people just call all of them blueprints because they're large scale, D size paper, 24 by 36 sheets of paper, generally speaking. But I look back at it now, but I was always pushing the edge with the software, and we started out with the daisy wheel pen plotter and the IBM PC and the 5 1/4 floppies. And I remember Bruce Carlson came down to our office. It was 1987, I think. And he was actually on our machine personally debugging the glitches in his Surveyor 1 program that he'd written, where we could do our coordinate geometry from our land surveying. Because you go out and you find pins and pipes and fence lines. You measure all these things with the instruments and would write the notes down in the field book and come back and enter them in this MS-DOS program with MS-DOS prompts, and then it would then control the pen plotter and actually plot the map for you accurately. And so, it was cutting edge at the time. And Bruce Carlson, then founded his company, Carlson Software, which is now one of the largest surveying or engineering software companies on planet Earth. And yet Anselmo's Engineering is still customer number 37. We knew him when it was just him and his little Dodge Colt, buddy. Way back when. The memories. Now computing is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But I feel like computing has turned most professions into
wow.
Wow, that's so cool looking.
Yeah, it's what about 20? Can't remember. It's 24 or 28 inches tall.
It's like they're just dumbed down. Like the last major project I worked on in surveying about 5 years ago, I had this guy with me who had just gotten his bachelor's degree in surveying, but he hadn't got his license yet. I got my permit in 1998 and then full licensure thereafter. And so this was in 2016. And so we go to meet the farmer out in the field. And there's this beautiful knoll with some oak trees that rises up, and it's got corn trees or in cornfield all around it. And there's a little passway going to the knoll between the corn rows there. And he's like, well, my granddaughter has bought a trailer and wants to put a trailer up on the knoll there, and going to leave her easement down this lane here from the Blacktop County Road back to this knoll. But her lot's just going to be the knoll, and I want it squared off like 2 acres. But I want it to be a perfect square, and then I'll write her out a ingress egress easement to get to it and stuff. So get out there, guys, here with me. And so the farmer's, he's got 4 flags, and he's like, so can you tell me roughly how wide, how deep that's going to be? Is it going to be 2 acres? Because it's got to be so much for the mortgage and the finance from the bank, all the stuff. So I look to the kid to my right here. I'm at that time, I don't know, I'm 44, but he's like, 21, 22, I think. And sharp kid, he's got handheld GPS, all the latest gadgets and stuff. And so the farmer hands him the flags, and he's like, it's like, just pace off. He wants about 2 acres, so just pace off a 2 acre square real quick. He's like, oh, okay. So he turns around and he's heading back to the truck. I'm like, well, where are you going? He's like, well, I'm going to put in some coordinates. And it's like, no, just pace it off, man. I was like, here, just give me the flags. and follow along. I was like, if you want 2 acres, that's going to be 20 square chains, right? And so the easiest way to pace off 20 square chains is to just run 4 chains wide by 5 chains deep. 4 times 5 is 20. And 20 divided by 10 is 2. There's 10 square chains to the acre. This is simple math, son. You can do it in your head. And 4 chains wide is, 16 poles, 264 feet. 5 chains deep is 330 foot deep. So, pace 110 deep. And then you're going to pace, let's see. Anyways, you just pace it off real quick.
The other way is tell the person wear a white shirt and walk out.
Yeah. But anyway, anyways, I just stuck the flags there, and he looked at it. He's like, no, go ahead and run it to the foot of the hill. And so, add it back there. Well, how big is that going to be roughly? It's like, well, now you're looking at 2 1/4 acres. Oh, okay. I was like, so this is roughly where you want it. I was like, well, we're going to make it perfectly at 2 1/4 acres. We'll make sure it's absolutely square corners, and then we'll mark off the passway and everything. And just the moral of the story was, that, it just, when I learned colonial surveying from my granddad, there was no computers. The only computer that my granddad had, he rode in a little leather sheath on his belt, and it was a slide rule, so he could do logarithmic calculations. But granddad did the square roots in his head anytime he had to do some Pythagorean triangulation from latitude and departure. But because I learned at latitude and departure, and then I could sit there and break down the calls at the end of the traverse in the field and make sure we didn't have a closure error, make sure we didn't have a bad turning point or any bad angles. And I couldn't imagine any of these. I couldn't even imagine a master's degree graduate from even like Purdue or Maine in surveying these days being able to do latitudes and departures and just graph out a traverse after they've measured it using an old compass and chain method. Which is the very basis of all geometric land surveying. because they're all, I mean, God forbid if they don't have the right ephemeris or if they can't lock on to 3 or 4 satellites, I guess they're just going to sit there and piddle their hands till they got GPS signal again. And then the worst thing about it is technology has allowed like surveying and engineering and architecture work to be too delegated and separated. And because, licensure takes so long and it's so expensive to maintain professional licensure, you have these huge multinational firms now that just have one surveyor on staff or one engineer on staff who's bought stamps for 15, 20 different states, and he never goes to any job site. His job is at the main headquarters building, and he just stamps plans. There's other people that do the title research work at the courthouses, pulling deeds, making sure they don't get on the wrong property when they're doing their work. And then there's somebody else that goes out with the hired help to go chop bushes and climb fences and do the measurements in the field. And never the 2 or 3 shall ever meet in person, maybe never even talk. And I mean, because I worked as a private practitioner. I've worked at some of these large firms, and my brother works at one right now. And it's the more statutes and administrative regs that they passed in Frankfort, Kentucky to professionalize surveying and engineering, the more it's completely destroyed the profession. We've gone from over 300 practicing land surveyors in the state of Kentucky to less than 30. We've gone from over 1,500 engineers practicing to less than 150. I mean,
for the legal terms, for sale, you still need the surveyors. For, like, I was on one experiment out in California where we spent an afternoon color coding ping pong balls. So we put 4 colors on each ping pong ball in multiple areas so we can catch any one angle of the ping pong balls. We could tell which combination that ping pong ball was and know its location. And then we just walked out in the desert and started throwing them all over. And I just know someday somebody's going to walk through the desert and see all these ping pong balls. We never bothered to go back out and pick them up. But what are these ping pong balls in the desert for? Because they're not going anywhere. And so when the camera went by, it could model the terrain by seeing where the location of all the ping pong balls were, and then comparing what the color codes were to saying, this is my reference point, and do a complete, half-inch resolution map.
Well, with the ping pong balls, you're going to have the points of reference so that you can do what's called in photogrammetry work, orthographic correction, right? Yeah. Because you have to correct for the orthography, or I hope I don't trigger anybody here, but turns out the Earth is not flat. So, and when you're in the sky and you're looking down, it kind of puts the warp to the corners of the projection of the image. And so you have to orthographically correct it and flatten out the entire image just because of the length from the focal lens of the actual camera taking the image down on the ground. Because I mean, it's the same thing with LiDAR or any type of photogrammetric work. I've so many times in my life gone out and laid panels and then waited for the flights over, and then more recently doing LiDAR paneling. But I mean, it's this. I mean, that's what you're talking about there. But it's I mean, have you heard about the LiDAR they've done in Belize and Guatemala, where they
for finding the
stripping away the vegetation and finding all kinds of Mayan cities that have just pretty much to this time been lost under the foliage there. Snorky, you heard about that, Snork?
Yeah, but about 5 years after we did that experiment out in the desert, I met somebody on the internet, and he was talking about how he lived just like 2 miles from there. And I'd seen this creek, and like I said, it's desert by California, the areas that don't get a lot of rain. And there had been this rainstorm, and I was thinking by the location where it's at, it was possible that there had been some gold venting because it was by a volcano.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that, well, an ancient one, and I thought that possibly that area was rich enough that if there'd been a rain, this little creek would have some gold in it.
Uh-huh.
So I told the guy about it. I said, go to the creek, and I pulled up on Google Maps a part of the river that was like had a bend in it. I said, go to the inside of the bend, look for a rock, lift the rock up, and tell me if you find any gold flakes. So he went down there. He found a gold nugget.
Wow.
And he's like, did you put that under that rock? And I'm like, when can I fly back? You know,
did you guys hear about that? The explosion, a cheese factory that exploded in France. Nothing.
I wasn't there. Nobody saw me. Nobody can prove anything. No, a cheese
I guess
factory
somebody
in
cut
France.
the wrong cheese.
That could be bad. I mean, France, some of their areas are very packed. You know, not something you can drive a great big fire truck down.
There was nothing left but debris. That's funny. That's funny.
Oh my god.
That's funny.
Anza-Barago. I don't know that as Anza-Barago. I'll have to look up and see where that is.
Anza-Borrego.
Oops, I need to copy that first.
I'm so happy everybody came to join us for this stream. Really awesome that we got
epic
to have
Friday
everybody
night,
on.
Saturday morning. And I found the most awesome video that this guy made of Rhode Island accent. Like after we had done the show the other night, and we were trying to find videos about it, Lucky.
Oh.
And I shared it with you. Like he called it Rhodonics. And oh my God, it was so hilarious. Like some of the words like fidgerator, put it in the fidgerator, right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And he's like, you know, in Rhode Island, we don't say ahs. We don't say ahs. PQRST.
Kate said it's in SoCal, Stork.
Yeah, I looked on the map. It's not there. Nowhere near there. You're closer to the super volcano by the Salton Sea.
Oh.
So, Stork, what do we got to do to save the planet?
Got to work real hard. I don't know any other way to say it is that we have to get over the idea that we can't do anything, but what we do have to get under control is the idea that we have to adapt. We're not any way, but we're going to go back to the way it was. Even if we did, we're not going to have the populations there that we used to live with. The main source of our oxygen was not trees and plants. The main source of our oxygen was algae in the Pacific Ocean. And the Pacific Ocean used to be full of these creatures called whales, specifically the sperm whales and the large whales. The sperm whale would go very deep. And sperm whale, it was not a vegetarian. It would eat large squid. And it would get diarrhea on the way back. And it would go to the surface and basically just leave a 2-mile path on the surface of fertilizer for algae. Algae pretty much grows just like coral in the first 250 feet of water in the ocean. So you got to get that turn back up there. Without the whales in the ocean, probably maybe the amount of impact it had might have been significant compared to the amount we put in from petroleum. I'm not saying petroleum doesn't putting in there, but we have to also think about there was this period of time where we hardly had any whales, and we need that turn out in the ocean. But we also overfished the ocean, and we took a lot of the minerals out of the ocean. So getting all of these things restored is necessary, and we have to get over the idea that we can do nothing. Earth's population got down to less than 5 females before. So our humans, 5 female humans. It's called the Great Bottleneck. But realistically, we need to take several steps, not one step. Maybe not even several, maybe thousands of steps.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change how we're doing energy. Just for me, even just to get the materials that I need, I can only get like 10 grams a month. And I'm doing research on alternative power sources. And I get this little bottle I can't even see where my camera is. It's this little bottle every once in a while. And, I get notes that I can't take it back out of the country.
There's two things that concern me about the Pacific in particular. Number one, of course, is the rising ambient temperature each year of the Pacific, which is leading to more energy fed into the super typhoons that have just been ravaging through now practically year after year through the Philippines and other areas. But more concerning than that is the acidification and ongoing pollution of the Pacific. And, in addition to the acidification in the water itself, which is bleaching the single largest coral reef on planet Earth there off the coast of Australia there in the Great Barrier Reef. There's also the pollution that's still leaching out of the Fukushima Daiichi plant in northern Japan. And of course, the more famous pollution that floats on the surface in terms of the microplastics and the larger garbage swirling around in what's known as the Pacific Gyre garbage patch.
That plastic is actually fuel. It's a byproduct of oil, so all of that can be turned back into fuel, and we don't have to frack, and it becomes a cleaner burning substance, and it just has to be distilled.
The parts of it that are what is called thermoplastics, we can. There are also a part of it that are called thermoset plastics, and those we have to break down with plasma. But there are methods. We just have to stop treating it like we're already dead, and we also have to stop treating it like it's not going to be expensive.
Yeah, and we can't afford not to do it.
Yeah, so right now most of our methods that we're using to address anything are with very small amounts of funds that are given. So what things we can do don't tend to be large. And then another problem with the Pacific Gyre is, like I said, the first 250 feet, that's because of light. When you have a gyre that's basically shading that area, it's not producing oxygen.
And so it's creating these huge dead zones across the Pacific because it's not allowing the light to get down, by covering the surface like that. And, really, I would see that there are probably two major things that I think would have such a significant impact for renewing and cleaning up the environment. Number one would be a global, worldwide prohibition on plastics and plastic products.
I'm
There
thinking
are
the
there
exact
are
opposite.
alternatives.
Yeah, I'm thinking the exact opposite. So right now we use a lot of sand. We do a lot of mining to get the sand and stuff like that. We can produce these plastics from plants grown out here. My thought is that we should be making as much plastic as possible because it's even denser in how it has the carbon chains in it. And then we should be putting that under our roads and whatever as a much firmer base to reduce how much we're putting or using to mine sand.
Now, I have seen, in my work when doing pavement design and working with the local hot mix plant here, Southern Paving, that they are using a lot more plastics, both with plastic netting and plastic polymer mixes in their bitumen batches there.
But I'd like to see larger blocks sunk down under the footing of the roads.
In fact,
the
what
ones
they're
they
using
make for houses, right? Like the compact bricks that they compress, like kind of like
cool. Imagine like you've seen like the orange plastic looking construction fencing that they'll have on some work sites that's held up with stakes, something like that. But imagine if it's 3-dimensional and it has like little lips coming up on it that are about an inch high. It's like we call it a geotextile or geotech fabric, and they're laying this down and putting hot mix on it, and so it's giving even more lateral structure to the finished pavement, and then putting the 1/2-inch primer on top of that. That's also got this polymer mix, where they're you're seeing a lot more recycling of plastics. But my point being, in terms of drinks, foods, products at the hospitals and other things that are relying solely on petrochemical plastic products made in Houston and other places, pure oil.
No, I agree. We need to get cut down on the petrol base.
And
I don't really
there are
see
so
any
many
need
products that can
right
be made
now
with
to
hemp
do.
and other natural plants and natural products. There are still some recycling chains where bottlers are bottling in glass and giving back in glass. I know myself, I don't drink or eat anything out of plastic. I know about phthalates. I know about all the other stuff that leaks out of plastic. I consider plastic to be just absolutely toxic in many ways. And the way it's breaking down in the oceans into microplastics, they're finding plastics in the meat of the fish, even the tiniest of fish. And so, unless there's some way to make green plastic out of plants that's entirely biodegradable and not toxic to other life, that's one thing I would want to get away from. The other thing I would want to get away from would be anything to do with the nuclear weapons program, which includes the so-called Atoms for Peace program, where they're using on any given day 8 to 10 coal-fired power plants in the Tennessee Valley Authority to send juice to the gaseous diffusion plant to enrich uranium fuel rods for our peaceful nuclear power plant program. And when I hear people say that George Monbiot up in he's on BBC a lot in England, George Monbiot, and he'll say, we need to go to green energy like nuclear, and I'm like, oh. So Yucca Mountain's taking the nuclear waste. Where are you going to put the plutonium at? Where do you put this nuclear waste? I still don't know where it's going to go. And it's every time they go to move nuclear waste on the rails or on the interstate highways, it's not in my backyard, and nobody wants it. And so we still have this issue today, and I don't know what the Department of Energy is going to do about it, but you have fuel rods and wet storage. You have dry cask storage. Virtually every single nuclear power plant is just piled up with nuclear waste all over the physical plant property because there's nowhere to put it. There's nowhere to dispose of it. It doesn't go away anywhere. And I mean, they've tried and tried and tried to find somewhere to put it. There are underground storages and at Los Alamos and some other places where they're able to secret some of this stuff away. But for example, close to me here in Huntington, down by Moorhead, Kentucky, is Maxey Flats disposal site. And there's a couple of other illegal dump sites here in Appalachia where just they were doing an open pit coal strip mine operation. And then they're like, hey, go ahead and bring in these 50 gallon drum barrels of plutonium and nuclear waste and everything else. And I mean, it's just stupefying to me. On the one hand, the pollution that you can't do anything with plutonium. It's not like depleted uranium where, like when I was a soldier in Iraq and Desert Storm, they had armor made out of depleted uranium. They had ordnance made out of depleted uranium. And for the people who aren't familiar with the term, depleted uranium is a beautiful euphemism for nuclear waste. It's repurposed nuclear waste. And, of course, when you detonate, like one of the places there had been contractors killed and they were hung from the bridge in the city of Fallujah. And in retaliation, they just carpet bombed Fallujah with these depleted uranium shells. And still to this day, it has the highest incidence of stillbirth and congenital birth defects of anywhere on planet Earth. I mean, their death rate in Fallujah, I think, is 15 times worse than Hiroshima. That place is so very toxic. And when they talk about our energy policy, I don't think they realize if they powered down and turned off every single nuclear power plant in the United States, they could immediately power down probably 3 to 4 electric power plants for every nuclear power plant they take offline because they all use power.
There's something sneakier coming up.
I want to show you guys this too. There's a clip. This is like what I was talking about. They're mining landfills. So I'm going to mute and I want to show this, especially because Snork's got to know about this. I want to know what you think about this one.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a rant against nuclear there. It just touches the nerve. Very dangerous.
The problem is there is no way. And plastic can take hundreds of years to degrade. So every single piece of plastic that has not been recycled still exists. I'm Oliver Steeds, and I've come to Ireland to investigate how we can convert our waste plastics into fuel.
We live in an age of plastics. Polyvinyl chloride is found in anything from pipes to window frames, polypropylenes in margarine tubs, even fibers for carpet, polystyrenes in building insulation and protective packaging. And we find polyethylene in anything from our plastic bottles to bin liners. They all have one thing in common. They were once oil, a mix of chains of carbon and hydrogen, which all have different properties depending on their structure. Much of this waste can be recycled into new products, but some of it, known as end-use plastic, currently has no second life and ends up in landfill, where it can release hazardous chemicals into the environment.
So what plastics can be used for fuel?
This is an example of the type of plastic that we're sending away now to be used as a fuel. So what we have is various colors of plastic: red, greens, blues, and whites. It's hand-picked out from the paper and the rest of the material, and it's baled up.
This is Sinar in Portlaoise, Ireland, where end-use plastic is given one more life.
Some of the plastics end up here in Sinar's processing plant. Michael's the CEO. Michael, what are we looking for here?
Well, these are bales of plastic that come in from waste management companies into us for processing into diesel fuel. So what this normally would go straight into a hole in the ground. Doesn't make any sense.
No.
So what we have to do with this now is reduce it, size reduce it. So it comes into us like this, like that, size reduce it. So it's the correct size to go into the process. It makes it easier to handle.
Sayona can process 1 ton of end-of-life waste plastic every hour and turn it into this, a mountain of 15mm flakes of clean plastic, where it's sucked up through this industrial vacuum and piped into a furnace.
So you can feel the heat from here. This is a simple, what is happening is the material is being delivered in. There's a screw mechanism and it's being pushed whilst heated along this barrel. It starts life at around 180. At 300 degrees, 300, 310, it's leaving this particular extruder. And it's like a hot chewing gum consistency.
The plastics are now ready to be converted into fuel.
Well, we're looking down here really to the heartbeat of the process. It's the pyrolysis vessels. We are heating the material up to a vapor temperature of about 385, 410. That then produces a hydrocarbon vapor.
The key point with pyrolysis is that there is no oxygen present, so the superheated plastics can't burn. Instead, the molecular bonds of the long carbon chains that make plastic what it is break apart, returning them to the various smaller hydrocarbon chains that they were created from in the first place. The different length hydrocarbon chains can then be separated.
The vapor that comes off the pyrolysis vessels passes through a unique baffle arrangement that's inside these contactor vessels here. So we're cracking carbon chains. So the heavy material is not allowed to leave and join the vapor line to the distillation column until it has the correct profile.
What happens in the distillation process?
The hydrocarbon vapor that leaves the top of the contactor vessels then travels through a vapor line, and that vapor line then arrives into our distillation column. In there, the condensable material then is liquefied, and we take off our diesel fuel off the bottom of the distillation column. Further up the column, then we have our light oil, and then our non-condensable gases leave the top of the distillation column. And it's those gases that we clean and use in the furnaces to heat the pyrolysis chambers.
How efficient is this process?
For every ton of plastic, we get about 800 litres of diesel.
When I think of plastic, I often think it's very toxic. What happens to all those toxins?
Well, we are not burning plastic, we're heating and paralysing plastic. So we're producing a vapour rather than oxidising the material when you burn it with a flame.
The only byproduct is a non-hazardous char, the pigments and fillers from the plastics, that Sayona hope will soon be given a second life, as either man-made tiles or pigment for decorative concrete.
Well, I now have a litre of diesel, but I want to put it through some tests. So I brought in a team from University College Dublin.
So what we'll do is we'll show you the performance of it, running on the emissions of it, running on normal diesel. We'll put some of this fuel into the tank. We'll run the test again, and we'll show you the performance and the emissions running on the synthetic diesels.
Key ones will be carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide, yep.
Hydrocarbons, HC.
Yep.
And oxygen.
Now I've got the comparative figures. One of the most striking things is this hydrocarbon footprint.
Yeah.
499 parts per million.
Yeah.
On conventional diesel. With synthetic diesel mixed in, it's 294. What does that mean?
What it means is, quite simply, the synthetic fuel is burning more efficiently.
And carbon dioxide. There seems to be a massive reduction in carbon dioxide emissions using synthetic fuel.
Because that's mainly due to the dilution with the oxygen. As you saw, the oxygen went up in it. So again, because the fuel was burning more efficiently, the engine's doing the same amount of work, but using a little bit less fuel.
So, Doctor, overall, your assessment?
The assessment of the fuel, the synthetic fuels, it's definitely one of the fuels for the future. It's a nice, clean fuel, clean burning as you saw from the emissions. The key benefit is that you're recycling carbon. So carbon that might have gone in the plastic, gone into landfill, or been disposed of by incineration, is now being recovered. It's been used as synthetic fuel, which means you don't need to take as much fossil fuel out of the ground. We have a saving on that. We can use those fossil fuels for maybe something else in the plastics industry, in the pharmaceutical industry.
Sayona are currently able to produce 10,000 litres of synthetic fuel a day in this plant, but they're soon opening up new and bigger plants in the UK. With 15 million tonnes of plastic still going into landfill in Europe every year, they're not short of their raw materials, but the political and consumer mindsets need to catch up.
The vast majority of plastic waste is still not recycled, but there does seem to be a solution here. If only society and industry can look at end-of-life plastics not as a waste, but as a product that has value and something that does have use.
I think we're unique because now, as you can see, we are in a studio atmosphere. We're not in.
Oh wait, that wasn't hang on. That wasn't the exact one that I was thinking of, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
to see.
I was just going to respond to Charlie's question that you had posted on screen there about plastics. He said, "Is it all plastics that are harmful, or just petroleum-based plastics? You can also make plastic from hemp and milk." Or you can make plastic from hemp and milk too. I was just speaking to the toxic plastic being, the pure oil, petroleum-based plastics. Yes, you can make plastic products from things other than oil, and there's also plastics that are fully recycled, plastic products as well. But the Big Oil and Rockefeller and Standard Oil and all that took over Cleveland, Ohio, and became such a mammoth, probably the biggest monopoly of all time. And Big Oil spawned off Big Plastic. It spawned off Big Pharma. And, there's no question our foreign policy is in large part influenced or sometimes directed by Big Oil and its corporate interests. And that goes a lot to our energy policy. When it comes to energy consumption and oil consumption, there's no question the single largest user on planet Earth is not the American people per se, but the United States Armed Services. When you have over 850 foreign military bases and the world's largest Navy and the world's largest Air Force and the world's largest arsenal, turns out that burns a lot of energy every day. It takes a lot of fuel to keep an aircraft carrier floating around the Pacific, and takes a lot of fuel to keep those F-15s flying from, Riyadh to Sana'a back and forth so they can keep delivering American-made bombs to the good people of Yemen. I mean, nobody uses more oil and pollutes more carbon every day than the U.S. military. It's staggering, truly staggering to see how much pollution they put out. And, we covered something.
What I wanted to know from
in Hawaii, right?
What was that thing
in Hawaii? Red Hill, where they're poisoning the water from the Navy oil drums or something. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, this is the clip that I wanted to do.
Norway is burning so much trash that they are begging other countries to give them the rubbish.
That's awesome.
They've already been doing the same thing as Ireland.
So this is the one I was thinking of.
And that's incredible because Norway has oil they're bringing in off the coast. They have a lot of deep sea drilling, yet they're doing that.
Yeah.
They've taken the long view.
This is the one that I was thinking of. And I wanted to see if this would be anything viable, because I know you do the factory and all that stuff.
So as in Nova Scotia? Must be Nova Scotia.
Produce roughly 30 million tons of garbage a year? That's a lot. And get this, in many municipalities, only 30% of it gets recycled. That's not very much.
Now, what if I told you there's a company in Chester, Nova Scotia that claims to have technology that can turn that trash into treasure, so to speak? Sound too good to be true?
Well, at Sustain Technologies, they say they can turn your bag of waste into fuel with minimal impact on the environment.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
I brought my garbage for you.
So says this guy, Peter Vinyl. I'm not kidding. Vinyl, as in the plastic. Yep, and he's assembled quite the gadget to do it. More on that in a second.
So I see a coffee cup here, Most places in Canada will not recycle this. I see some metal here, a metal container, we'll recover that metal 100%. I see some foam here, packaging, typically you can't recycle that. We'll turn that into diesel. Okay, Tom, this is the start of our process where the garbage is going in. So I'm going to throw your bag in.
First step, shred it to bits. Then put it through 15 different steps of separation. And they don't even have to lay a finger on any of it.
This is an eddy current effect separator where any aluminum, like you just saw there, is going to get, it comes along, it's negatively charged, it hits a positively charged roll with a high voltage inside, and it flips off at an angle. So that's how we separate the aluminum.
The metal you see flying there, that gets recycled.
So with the metal gone, what's left is plastic, paper, cardboard, diapers. We can cook that, get it to separate so that we can make real useful products.
That's right, cook it or heat it up, not burn it. That would be bad for the environment.
What we're doing here is unmaking them. So we're allowing them to break apart so that we can then separate them.
Then the biomass is turned into pellets for industrial heating, diverting up to 90% of waste from the landfill.
That's biomass. So that would, your coffee cup, your tissue, your diapers, it's clean biomass. So that's carbon neutral fuel that can be used to replace fossil fuel.
And that pesky plastic that never breaks down in the landfill?
So we've got high resolution cameras under this orange unit here that are looking at, and they scan every particle in real time, and then they fire off. We've got 250 air jets there, and they're timed to shoot and hit the plastic and accept it. Pretty cool, huh?
And that plastic is heated up too, turning it back into oil, diesel and kerosene to be exact, which is used to fuel the plant itself. The whole process to recycle my bag that would have otherwise gone to the landfill takes 2.5 hours. Still back at the curb with the rest of my garbage, there's skepticism. Marla McLeod is an environmentalist with the Ecology Action Center.
We need to start thinking more systemically about the problems we're creating as a society. So this is a way to, to fix plastics we've already produced. It is a Band-Aid over that. But again, I would caution investing heavily in infrastructure that perpetuates the status quo and perpetuates our consumer throwaway culture.
And you know what, I have sympathy for that view. But inevitably, there's going to be some plastic. And so you just can't turn that faucet off right away. So we're going to take garbage from a population of 150,000 people. And in environmental terms, we're going to have the equivalent reduction of 40,000 cars off the road in this first plant.
And they're not stopping there. They plan to eventually mine landfills, reducing methane emissions and greenhouse gases. Yes, in this little community, they're thinking big. Tom Murphy, CBC News, Chester, Nova Scotia.
Yeah, so that's the video that I had seen before, and it looked, really interesting, but I didn't know if that would be something that would really...
A company called Waste Management has many of those plants throughout the United States already.
Oh, they do?
Almost identical. There's one in far northern Illinois, just north of Chicago, that whole region's garbage goes to. They produce more than any dump goes to, and it's cheaper for them than actually, putting it in a landfill. Because they have to pay money for every tipping, but they get paid for all of this stuff that they give away as fuel. So it really becomes a cost savings for the waste management company and a profit center. And then Waste Management is like one of the largest garbage companies in the world.
Yeah, we have that here. Waste Management.
It's a shame that they don't put one of those in there in Ashland because, I know why there's nothing like that around here, because in Catlettsburg, you have the Ashland Oil Refinery works, and it's a massive, massive oil refinery. And it's at the port of Huntington on the Ohio River navigation, the busiest inland port in the United States in terms of tonnage.
I wanted to get to one thing before I go to. I've been up since 8. I had my first class at 8.
Oh, go ahead.
So there is something been sneaking in for quite a while, and during the last 10-15 years, people have been talking about how much safer the salt-based thorium reactors were going to be. There is a new nuclear reactor that is almost at licensing stage called a natrium, and it's supposed to stand for that it's a salt-based reactor. It is not a molten salt thorium reactor. It is a uranium-powered reactor that basically makes it works just like any other nuclear reactor, but it stores its heat in salt. They are not the same. This is not a fail-safe nuclear reactor. And I'm very, very concerned that we've built up this reputation as salt-based reactors being so much safer than our PWRs and AWRs. And what are BWRs?
Boiling water reactors.
Yeah. And what is going to happen is, I think the public is just oh, this is a natrium. It's a salt-based reactor. And they're going to think it's all nice and safe. And it's basically a bait and switch.
You know, whenever, Snork, whenever you explain to someone how a nuclear power plant works that's using like for an example, a General Electric boiling water reactor, it's kind of a gobsmacker to most people. You know, I mean, you're going to all this trouble to, you know, cause a nuclear reaction, and you're going to be producing enriched uranium, you're going to be producing plutonium and all this nuclear waste, but you'll also be producing a lot of heat, which can turn water into steam that you could then pipe the steam against a turbine, and then the steam will push the turbine pretty much like the old Connecticut grist mill, like with an old water wheel or something. I mean, it's so crude and primitive the way they're converting nuclear energy into electricity. And, you know, I've often thought, I mean, it doesn't make sense to produce that nuclear waste just to have electricity produced in this fashion. I always took it as they have to get plutonium from somewhere. They have to enrich this from somewhere, and that you can't have nuclear weapons without nuclear power plants.
Not in large volumes. In fact, one of the nuclear fuels we need for spacecraft, we hardly have any. And several space missions had to be delayed to store. And there's many different isotopes of plutonium. But there's one specific one that's really good for spacecraft. We used it in most of our most stable, best producing vehicles out there. The Pioneers and the Voyagers all had this species of plutonium in them. But the remaining lot of it, instead of going to a satellite, was reserved for Cheney to have spare nuclear-powered hearts.
Nice.
And he had his put in because he said as vice president, he couldn't risk having to go in to have his changed out. And so, I mean, it takes a lot of reactions for you before you get even just a little bit of that isotope. And it's very difficult to pull out just one atom. So you have to create an awful lot to be able to put out. There's one reactor system in Canada that actually runs on 80% depleted uranium. So, I mean, we could be using some of our waste, but it's a big profit for some people to be digging up and making these other fuels.
Yeah.
So, in making, I did one thing I demonstrated for the DoD that we used heat from the ocean to produce electricity, and our byproduct was drinking water. And immediately I was reprimanded that I would need the permission of a congressman to put a bill through Congress before I could do it again in the United States waters.
I think we have all the technology we need to do it. We just have to implement it and just, decide that we're just going to do this.
Well, one of the problems is we have created the waste. We have not put together a plan to deal with it. The last time that we had a major nuclear accident, a plane went down in Australia and it didn't even make the news.
Yeah.
So when the WIPP caught fire in New Mexico, we probably should have evacuated Texas. But instead, all the news companies were focused on this plane that erratically went off course in I forgot which area it was in.
Talking about the one that crashed in
MH370.
MH370, the one that crashed, was it in
Malaysia
or Ukraine or Malaysia? Malaysia, MH370. Yeah. They never did find it, did they? They kept.
They found parts of it.
Huh?
They found parts of it.
So they didn't kidnap it and take it to Diego Garcia.
I mean, the news was riveted on it. They were doing anything they could to keep the news on it. They were talking about maybe aliens took it. Every single news company every night was just spending time on it.
I did hear about the fire at the WIP though.
Fire
there
of
at,
the WIPP.
That was at Los Alamos Lab, wasn't it?
Near there.
Well, I mean, close to Los Alamos.
Yeah.
But I mean, WIP has some of that dangerous storage underground down in the caverns.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, undergrad, one day seeing all of these EPA suits coming in, class 1 hazardous material suits, shutting down our classes and getting us out of the way. From when the school I was at made the original nuclear fuel, and they stored their waste as dead professors in the campus cemetery. They figured it out and they had to come take it out, and it was just like nobody heard anything until that happened.
Wow.
Okay, so I don't need a full answer because I know you got to go, but do you think it's the cows' fault? Are they a big part of this? Because everyone always blames the cows.
Blames the cows for
like the gases and the all that's happening.
Well, I think that some activists get a little bit too focused on one thing, and then they don't look to see if there's anything else. The cows are not putting out as much methane as Siberia is from warming.
Yeah, I was about to say those melting clathrates on the Siberian shelf are way more than the cow farts, Snork.
Well, I'm just wondering if
rates off in Norway
the cows are just getting a bad rap, or is it the cows that are getting a bad rap, or
the calth rates off in Norway are the ones that really should be the big worry.
Yeah.
They've actually gone unstable before in history, and that is the biggest type of tsunami known.
Yeah. For those people that aren't aware, clathrates or calthrates are it's basically a frozen state of methane, and they kind of look like
ice.
It looks like a white ice or something, or maybe like a white styrofoam or something that's floating up to the surface of the water. And then it just kind of, as it thaws out, it just turns into fizzy bubbles and poof.
Unless there's a lightning storm.
Oh, and then you get flames?
Then you get booms.
Wow. But now there's also been explosions of some of these as they thaw, and it'll make the permafrost as it thaws. It'll actually kind of make a bubble, and the ground will bubble up, and then boom, it'll explode, and it makes like this little crater. and there's these craters where there's been these explosions of the thought. I mean, it's just, you know, some of my indigenous brothers up north in Alaska, like the Yupiks, are really taking it hard. With what's going on there. The one thing, last thing I wanted to share with you was the Huntington pilot program here. There's a major metalworks plant here called Special Metals, and we're on the rail line that comes up from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and they, for about 25 years, they ran the Huntington pilot program there, where they there was nickel coating on the fuel rods, right? Nickel coating on the uranium rods or something they were doing at Oak Ridge.
How long ago was that?
This is from 57, 58 until
later on we used
73, 74, because they phased out nickel coating and went to
yeah, I only use zircaloy.
Zircaloy. Thank you. So this is it's really a primitive. The nickel plating was a primitive thing, and again, you know, early 50s nuclear technology. You know, they did a lot of really stupid stuff, and I don't know if some of the higher ups knew how dangerous it was or not, but just really stupid stuff. And so the harebrained idea was, when they scraped this radioactive slag out of the bottom of these experimental reactor units at the Oak Ridge Laboratory, which is outside of Knoxville, down in Tennessee, they would scrape these huge chunks of slag out, put it right on a rail car, send it up the rail line to Special Metals, and then they would melt the slag down, and that way they were able to skim the nickel off and recycle the radioactive nickel, which they then gave to the neighboring halide bumper factory, and they would use the nickel to plate the bumpers. And then everyone at the nickel plant started dropping dead from cancer, and then everyone at the Huntington pilot plant started dropping from cancer. And then they kind of figured it out. And so they hastily came in and completely demolished a third of the Special Metals property that was the Huntington pilot program buildings. And then when they got done with that, the bulldozers and backhoes that removed the debris and the rail cars that were used, they all went into the pit as well, because they dug a huge pit at the southern end of the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion works in Portsmouth, Ohio, where they buried all that stuff. And I'm not sure what they're doing at Portsmouth now, but I'm pretty sure they stopped doing enrichment at Portsmouth works there 4 or 5 years ago at least, because they used to do some of that at Fernald as well down near Cincinnati. That's been closed for 30, 40 years. And I other than Paducah, I don't know of any other enrichment works this side of the Mississippi River that are still in operation, other than Oak Ridge.
Involved in enrichment.
Huh?
I was not involved in any enrichment plants.
But I mean, it's that there's a lot of logistics involved to all of that. A lot of logistics. And
all right, we gotta let
anyways,
Snort go because he's
I just
not
wanted to
feeling
share
well.
that with you.
Snort, you know you gotta come back on. You promised. You gotta do another one.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me go on and on about that, Snort.
No
I
problem.
missed our late night talks, Mister.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics I really can't cover.
Yeah, yep. That's why I leave it open to you. All right, we'll feel better.
Commercial confidentiality, not anything top secret.
Yeah.
No problem.
Snork will say, "Yep, I can't. Nope." And we just respect that because there's things that he can't talk about.
I'm more afraid about getting sued than killed.
I don't know, Snork.
Snork knows this country's full of lawyers. If you don't know, now you know.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care, Snork.
I'll see
Be
you
well.
soon. I love that guy. We've had many of late night conversations of Snork just blowing and melting my brain. He is a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
The stuff
Absolute
that he
genius.
knows that is not classified that he can tell us about. It's intense. I'm so glad he came in.
I finally did it last night, Lucky. I finally pulled the trigger, and I guess it was just after midnight last night. I released my first article on the KRTD blog. Woohoo! The first Yona rhymes.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. That was such an awesome conversation from the beginning all the way. And
yeah, what
I'm
about all
so
that
glad
stuff
that
that
Glory
Mr.
Jones came on
Wilson
and
shared?
I'm glad that Glory Jones came on and Mr. Wilson. And that was a surprise to Glory. I didn't tell her. She saw it in the chat before I got to tell her, but she didn't know Mr. Wilson was going to come on. So that was an extra surprise. And he was so happy to see her yesterday. She stopped him over on his stream. He's like, Glory Jones, you're alive. You didn't die. So, yeah, it was awesome. I just adore those guys.
And that was
oh
also cool because Gloria was
As you
talking
know, those
about
late
her
night
interest in
conversations.
international affairs. Yeah, I mean, that was such a treat for Glory too, because I heard her talking about how she's into studying foreign languages and foreign culture. She studied international relations in college, and then to have Mr. Wilson on there, his perspective internationally from Pakistan.
You don't get that.
We have such an
Stream,
international
he's silly.
following, such an international show here. So awesome. We got friends all over the world, Lucky.
I know people all over the world, and I've had many a late night conversations with a lot of them. Oh my gosh, Oz knows. Oz and I we had so many late night conversations. When Oz started coming on, it was because I already know Oz. And and Prop and Snork and Yelbro and all them guys, we were always online talking to each other. So yeah, and sometimes on occasion we'd get a Steve I call him Pokemon, and we would get a pasta in there, and we got and Mariana's in there all the time, and ICU and Mona. So we're gonna have to do some fun Discord stuff too. But I like doing it in this way too. Having everybody come on and just see people behind the scenes. Just that the other side of them that we don't always see, when we're covering heavy stuff or whatever. It's a really cool collaboration that I'm just so excited about. These stupid bots.
And you know what? I don't think I've heard anyone tonight mention one time. I don't even want to mention it now, because and I don't want to talk about it. The last time we had our show, we talked about it at the end, and we said that Chanda would be the one to reach out to, and then I saw that they were going to cover it tonight, and then Steve was telling me, and then you were telling me well, anyways.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that right now. We don't need that. We don't need to do that on air.
No. I'm talking about the point being that I'm making is There's been no mention of the Rona. There's been no mention of the virus. There's been no mention of the pandemic. We've just been living our lives tonight, being fearlessly authentic, and we've talked about other things and other stories and other stuff all night long. I've looked in the chat. I've not seen it in the chat. It's been nowhere, and it's so refreshing. It's like a sigh of relief, Lucky.
Yeah.
That we're
I know
finally
the other day I
able
was
to
like,
have
I
an
don't
entire
want to
show
talk about
and
it
not talk
because
about it.
it's just so much sometimes. It's like there's just like not much more that I can say right now that is a big change.
I'm just kind of burned
So
out
certain
on
nights I'm just like, no, can we just stay off that subject? Like it just doing it intentionally and bringing something about it, but otherwise I'm just like, I've said it all. Like from what is happening now, I've said it. There's plenty of people like talking about it, and unless there's something that's a big deal with it, I don't really want to cover that. Like I don't want that to be a focus unless it is a show based on that. But,
I'm just so happy. I'm so thrilled. It's such a positive vibe. I mean, I just stopped and took stock of what we've done since. I mean, ever since you went live at midnight, we've just been doing our thing, unconsciously, just enjoying each other's company on the fly. And it's never come up. It's never been any discussion. And even now, I'm not discussing it. I'm simply saying I'm thrilled to pieces that it never was a part of the discussion tonight, and that we're able to still talk about arts and music and culture and international exchange and not involve that. Because good Lord, and I listened to the radio.
It can just be too much sometimes,
It was all over the radio coming home from work at 10:30 tonight. It was when I stopped and got cigarettes at the store. Every single newspaper. It's still
I don't want to even start talking about it now, though.
And so I'm not going to talk. I'm just saying it's been an overload. It's been so exhausting, and I just get so fucking burned out on this shit, Lucky. And this has been such a breath of fresh air.
We did. I think we briefly touched on something at the very beginning, but I think that was it. It was never a focus. It was maybe a quick side note.
Yeah, it was just a sidebar footnote. I mean, this is just what I needed tonight. I really,
this is like,
and it's colder than shit outside. It's 4 degrees outside my window right now. 4 fucking degrees. Oh my God.
Remember a couple of years ago, they canceled school because it was so below the negatives. It was like -10 and shit. Like,
oh my God.
It wasn't because of snow. It was because you couldn't stand outside even for a school bus because it was so bad.
Yeah. God, are we going to get to 0 tonight? Are we going to go negative? Man, I can't remember the last time it was this cold.
I don't know.
Ugh.
Well, I think I'm gonna wrap up for the evening. I am I'm a little worn out today.
Real quick, I just wanted to read the rhyme that I had here. I'll tell you how big it is and how long it'll take, and let you decide.
I thought it was too. So Phenomenal Mysticism said, Lucky Burrito wanted to see Glory Jones in a more laid-back tone. Glory Jones has a great personality. She does. Amen. And it's good to see, the other side of the people, when it's just them chilling and hanging out. And, they work so hard, and it's just good. It gives us a little bit of a glimpse into, knowing each other a little bit more too.
So this is 15 lines. It'll take about 90 seconds. And okay. I don't have anything else to discuss. And I have to work all day tomorrow. So I need to get sleep too. But I have so much fun with you every time. It's always such a warm and fulfilling experience, It's
Yeah,
just
it's like
such
it's
a
like us
positive
just
vibe.
getting together and smoking out or whatever and chilling. Like if what we would talk about in person, you know?
It's like that part of the 70s show when they're like in the circle and they're passing it around with Fez and you know. So without further ado, here is the latest Yona rhymes. The Yona rhymes. From Greenwich Village to tornado pillage, all candles to the winds. Workers at Mayfield Consumer Products must fill in those bins. Gotham shirtwaist corsets burning there so brightly evermore. In New Amsterdam air between East River and North River shore, aflame above the 7th floor, padlocked chains upon the door. From Greenwich Village to tornado pillage, all sheets to the wind. Florentine warehouse scene, slaves sewing the fashionable trend. Teresa Moda catwalk, sorrow has no color, and 7 victims more. Tuscan shame, what claim to fame, immigrants at opposite shore. No escape, what horrid fate, when bars are blocking the only door. Screaming sirens, weather alerts, blinding rains, and howling winds. Denied pleas to the manager, and no one leaves till the roof bends. Workers' pride must subside, despite family at home in a single wide. If we leave now, we're fired for sure. The next morning sun sighed. Cue the aerial F5 drone tour. There wasn't anywhere to run or hide.
Wow, that was powerful. What's the name of it?
From Greenwich Village to tornado pillage. That's the Yona rhyme.
That's awesome. Don't you guys love that? And Yona, you have to plug where you have your. See, I get this. See, it's not natural to go like that with the other hand.
And that
so
is at
they
the
can find you.
KRTD Media blog. If you go to krtdmedia.com, and at the main menu, it'll pull up. You'll see underneath the 3-headed dog there, the symbol for KRTD Media. You'll see home, blog, schedule, and our team. And it's right there under blog.
That's awesome. Is that the one that's on there, or is there's
Yeah.
going to be new ones going up there, right?
Yeah, that's the first one that I just published out, and then I'll be putting up more. But the basic gist is there's generally 3 parts to each blog that I put up there. There's the antecedents, the recents, and then the rhymes. And the antecedents will be historical newspaper clips from 100 or 200 or 150 or 50 years ago. And then the recents will be something that's happened within the last few weeks or days, and showing how it's almost a perfect repeat of a historical event happening again. And so that's why it's called the history rhymes with the Yona, right? The Yona history rhymes. Because Mark Twain said, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it always rhymes. And so I'm playing off that. And so I'll have the clips of the old stories from long ago and a few recent stories, and then I put it all together in a brand new rhyme and put it all together. And I do it that way because I find that I'm actually able to say more things and communicate more things in writing in a poetic style, because you're able to cram more things between the lines. And you can, it's crazy. It's like you can say more by saying less. And for the unsophisticated reader that may just read it once or twice, they're like, wow, that's really good poetry. That sounds pretty. But with the Yona history rhymes, you're going to have to read, if it's got 15 lines, you're going to have to read it 15 times. And each time you read it, you're going to keep pulling more and more stuff out of it, more and more stuff. And then I have a poem to ponder at the end which I've read to you before. And then, you know, at the end of each rhyme, I have the moral of the story, right? And this is what I shared with you before. The moral of the story is the compliant corpse is just as employed as the fired non-compliant. So save your own life before you save the job that kills you.
Yes.
And that was the moral of the story from the shirtwaist corset fire in New York City in 1911. That's the story from the Chinese immigrant workers that died in the fire in Florence, Italy a few years ago. It's the same thing with the Amazon warehouse workers that were killed while they were fulfilling orders outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And it's the same thing with those Kentucky workers in Mayfield that were packaging scented candles for Christmas gifts when their factory was destroyed. And we were actually, you and I and Steve were actually here on this show live when the candle factory and when the Amazon factory was destroyed and all that.
Yes.
For viewers watching now, you can go over to Lucky Burrito YouTube channel, and she has all the previous shows there, and she has that clipped out and marked where we had our storm coverage on the night of December 10th going into the early morning hours of December the 11th. We covered it live here, folks. And I was scared to death because I thought it was going to get us.
We're going to wrap up, though, because I am super tired. All right.
Great show.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us. That was an awesome, awesome show.
Did you see how many viewers you had?
Check out KRTD Patreon if you want to support independent media. And I believe that down in the description, click the link in the description, like Mr. Wilson says. There should be a thing down there, I think, too. But really, we just love doing this with you guys, and we appreciate it all. And namaste, everybody.
Don't I go home?